radio family. Just wanted to give you a little bit of an update that as a staff, we've been working hard and working remote from home on our computers, keeping in touch with people, ensuring people are being looked after, cared for, trying to provide spiritual leadership and guidance to children and youth. And so we've been doing all of that, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for me to connect with you this way as well. So we find ourselves in week 3 of everything being shut down, and we now know it looks like it's going to last well into April, to the end of April. COVID-19 has impacted everyone in pretty much every area of our lives, particularly our plans. It's interesting that 2020 was called sort of the year of vision, 2020 vision, and people are asking, what's your vision? Well, what's happened to all our visions for this year? You know, every one of us lives off of plans and schedules. Work schedules, home, leisure, planning important events and activities and trips. As a pastor, I'm a planner. I'm very wired that way, as you know, with a strategic plan, coordinating all our activities and programs for the year. But all of that planning has been completely and utterly derailed. You know, as I said to my colleagues a week or so ago, that my ministry playbook pretty much got canned. For some of you, the undermining of plans has created great stress and heartache. A family member is planning a wedding for June, a beautiful outdoor wedding, and she has already invested so much time and effort and money, and now this wonderful event is all in question whether it's going to happen or not. For the first time, I think so many of us, we feel powerless and helpless. We've all lived with some semblance of control. We had some control over our lives, but now we have no control, and this is particularly unnerving for us, and maybe even a little humbling. Think about it. With all our technology, with all our advances, with all our power and might, our advanced civilized world has literally been brought to its knees by a little bug. You know, what stands behind our need for control is the deep desire to see our lives flourish and to be fruitful. We want our lives to have purpose and meaning, to have happiness and joy, to be difference making. And having control over our lives means that we can execute a plan, you know, in fulfillment of these things. But COVID-19 has exposed what I call the illusion of control. None of us has really any control over our lives or what happens to us in lives. And that's very disheartening to hear. You know, the Bible makes this reality clear, but it also makes something else wonderfully clear. Proverbs says, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. Or Jeremiah 29, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. What the Bible makes very clear is that God has a plan and purpose for you, a plan to bless you, to prosper you, and nothing in this universe can undermine God's plan for you. It stands firm and is forever. I want to share with you a couple thoughts about God's plan from Ephesians 1, verses 9 to 10. Listen to what it says. He made known to us the mystery of his will according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in Christ, to be put in effect when the times reach their fulfillment, to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth under Christ. There are two things that these verses say about God's plan, what it is and what it means for our lives. Well, the first thing you got to understand about God's plan is that there is one. There is a plan. And the reason I say this is because as life happens, it often doesn't feel like there's a plan. In the movie Star Wars, there's this crazy laser battle happening, and the two main characters, Luke and Han, are in the middle of this chaos, and Luke assures Han that he has everything in control. And Han sarcastically responds, "Glad to hear." And sometimes that's our immediate reaction when we hear God has a plan. Because like Han, we're almost sarcastic in response, saying, "Glad to hear that." Life can be incredibly confusing. So many things happen to us that we just don't understand, things that we don't expect. The good things that we hope for don't happen. Our health, relationships, career. I mean, no one could have predicted that we would be in a global pandemic with everything being shut down and with so many people shut out of work. There are times you kind of think you know what God's doing. And then something utterly unexpected happens that throws you into confusion and frustration. A ministry colleague of mine was facing terrible burnout and stress. And his ministry leaders decided to give him just time away for rest and relaxation. And in fact, someone had offered him a home in Australia, of all places, so he and his wife and children could spend some time and rest. And when he shared that with me, I was so happy for him. And I thanked God for taking care of my friend. But on his way there, he suffered a terrible, life-threatening accident that completely derailed and undermined this trip in Australia. And when I heard it, I was so upset for my friend. And I literally cried out to God, "God, what are you doing?" Have you ever cried out that question to God? But in spite of our perceptions and experiences, there is a divine plan in operation in our world. Notice the expression in verse 10, "when the times have reached their fulfillment." What does that mean? See, the focus is all of history. All of history, God has a plan for it. All of history is moving towards a divine end. You know, there are literally two ways you can approach history. One way is there is no plan. Everything is random chance. Probably most people ascribe to this view of history, most people in our culture. But not everyone who holds to that view is willing to accept the implications of that view. What implications? Well, that there is no ultimate purpose or meaning in anything. If you want to live life not believing in God, not believing that there is a divine plan, you have to accept and honestly face the reality that everything you do, while it may have some immediate impact within the larger scope of history, is utterly and completely meaningless. Your life and your contributions will never be remembered. But the other way to view history is to view it the way the Bible views history. There is a plan, and there's purpose and meaning in everything. This is encouraging because with this view, it means that your life matters. It counts. Your contributions are necessary and will never be forgotten. But what does God's plan include? Well, it includes everything. In Ephesians 1 verse 11, it says, "according to the plan of Him," God, "who works out everything in conformity with His purpose and will." I mean, that means everything that happens in history, whether it's good or bad, contributes to God's plan. God has a blueprint for all of history. A similar idea is conveyed in Romans 8, verse 28, where it says, "where we know in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." So the tough thing we have to get our heads around is how evil, suffering, and pain and hardship contribute to the plan. Because according to the Bible, it all contributes. Now, this doesn't mean that God authors pain, suffering, and evil. It means, though, that he does use these things that he does not desire, that he does not will, to contribute to the purpose and fulfillment of his will. A perfect case study is the life of Joseph recorded in the end of Genesis, where terrible and awful things happen to him. But in the end, he sees it contributes. Where he says these famous words, Joseph, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." While COVID-19 caught us all by surprise, it didn't catch God by surprise. While COVID-19 has undermined all our plans, it has not undermined God's plan, because it all contributes. So what's the ultimate goal of God's plan? Well, it's stated in verse 10, to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth under Christ. The present condition of our world is that everything is falling apart. Both the physical and spiritual realms are in chaos, conflict, decay, and death. We know this. But what is God doing about it? How will his plan fix this? Well, by bringing everything under Jesus Christ. It's a very interesting Greek word that's used. It's only used in one other place in the New Testament. It literally means to add up numbers in a column. In literature, it means to bring to summary and conclusion different parts of the story and bringing them all together. I enjoy reading Tom Clancy novels. And one of his literary devices is to introduce 4 or 5 different stories that seem utterly disconnected. You don't see how they contribute, but as you progress through the novel, near the end, he seams all these stories together, and you can see how they all contribute. That's the idea. And when everything is brought under Christ, everything will be healed. All divisions, all destructions, death, and chaos that results will end. The universe will become a place of order, symmetry, peace, wholeness, and wellness. There will be new heavens and new earth, which are the renewed heavens and the renewed earth, where everything will be under God and Christ again. Only when Jesus reigns as King will this happen. Why don't things add up now? Why is everything still so disconnected? Because Jesus isn't reigning over everything yet. Now, if that's God's plan, what does it mean for our lives? How should we live in the reality of God's plan to bring universal reunification so that the universe and our world will be a paradise again? Let me just share 2 quick thoughts. First, you got to participate in God's plan. The truth that God has a plan should not lead us to passive disengagement, but rather to active participation, because what you do matters. God uses your contributions, uses your life, uses your work as part of his plan. Later in Ephesians 2 verse 10, we are told we're God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God prepared in advance for us to do. So that tells us your work matters. We're called to active participation, to exercise our will, because our choices and actions matter. But finally this, you can rest. You can rest in God's plan. I want to go back to that Greek word which says to bring everything under Christ, because it means that right now not everything adds up, not everything makes sense. We don't know how everything contributes. But because we don't see how it contributes doesn't mean it doesn't contribute. See, God promises and assures us that one day, like an obscure piece of a puzzle, it will all fit. It will all make sense to how it contributes to the beautiful work of art God is doing and creating in you and me. Knowing and believing in God's plan can lead you to a beautiful place of inner rest. Can I encourage you to see this time, these moments, not as a time of uncertainty, but a time of certainty, because God is in control. He loves you, and he has a plan to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. May God bless you. and thanks for listening.